Hi, welcome to our channel of ignou audiobooks. Indira Gandhi National Open University, School of Social Sciences, SOSS, Master's Degree Programs, MA in Psychology, MAP, Second Year, MPCE 0 to 1 Counseling Psychology, Block-3 Types of Counseling, Unit-3 Child Protection and Child Rights Counseling, 3.0 Introduction. India has made tremendous progress with regard to different aspects of development. It has taken large strides in addressing issues like child education, health, and development. However, child protection has remained largely unaddressed. India is home to almost 19% of the world's children. More than one-third of the country's population, around 440 million, is below 18 years. According to one assumption, 40% of these children are in need of care and protection, which indicates the extent of the problem. In a country like India with its multicultural, multi-ethnic and multi-religious population, the problems of socially marginalized and economically backward groups are immense. Within such groups, the most vulnerable section is always the children. Study on Child Abuse, India 2007 by Ministry of Women and Child Development, Government of India, 2007. In this context, protection of the child and ensuring the rights of the children will not only protect the child, but also provide him/her opportunities to achieve all-round growth and development. Traditionally in India, the responsibility of care and protection of children has been with families and communities. However, this very same situation also has made the children vulnerable to many kinds of neglect, abuse, and exploitation, in the process violating the child's rights. Our society is yet to become fully aware and understand the rights of the children. When we talk about the various rights of the children, then the gaps in child protection become obvious. Let us see the following statistics reported by the Ministry of Women and Child Development, India. 2.5 million children die in India every year, accounting for 1 in 5 deaths in the world, with girls being 50% more likely to die. 1 out of 16 children die before they attain 1 year of age, and 1 out of 11 die before they attain 5 years of age. India accounts for 35% of the developing world's low birth weight babies and 40% of child malnutrition in developing countries, one of the highest levels in the world. Although India's neonatal mortality rate declined in the 1990s from 69 per 1,000 live births in 1980 to 53 per 1,000 live births in 1990, it remained static, dropping only 4 points from 48 to 44 per 1,000 live births between 1995 and 2000. The 2001 census data and other studies illustrate the terrible impact of sex selection in India over the last few decades. The child sex ratio, 0 to 6 years, declined from 945 girls to 1,000 boys in 1991 to 927 in the 2001 census. Around 80% of the total 577 districts in the country registered a decline in the child sex ratio between 1991 and 2001. About 35% of the districts registered child sex ratios below the national average of 927 females per 1,000 males. In the 1991 census, there was only one district with a sex ratio below 850, but in the 2001 census, there were 49 such districts. India has the second highest national total of persons living with HIV/AIDS, after the Republic of South Africa. According to National AIDS Control Organization, NACO, there were an estimated 0.55 lakh HIV-infected 0 to 14-year-old children in India in 2003. UNAIDS, however, puts this figure at 0.16 million children, according to the 2001 census report. Amongst all persons living with disabilities, 35.9% were children and young adults in the 0 to 19 age group. 3 out of 5 children in the age group of 0 to 9 years have been reported to be visually impaired. movement disability has the highest proportion, 33.2%, in the age group of 10-19 years. This is largely true of mental disability also. SOSS, Ministry of Women and Child Development, 2007 Working Group, Report on Women and Children for the 11th Five-Year Plan, 2007 to 2012. This shows the extent to which our children face neglect, discrimination and exploitation in our society. This also reflects our lack of knowledge and understanding of the rights of our children. Violations of the child's right to protection take place in every country and are massive, underrecognized and underreported barriers to child survival and development, in addition to being human rights violations. Adopting rights-based approach with regard to children at various administrative and policy levels will help generate awareness and observation of these rights for the benefit of our children. 3.1 Objectives. After reading this unit, you will be able to times know the status of child rights in India, times define a child, times describe the different rights of the children, times understand the concept of child protection, times differentiate between child rights and child protection, times understand violation of child rights in its various forms, and times describe the importance of providing counseling to children whose rights are violated. 3.2 Child rights in India. India is a party to the UN Declaration on the Rights of the Child 1959. Accordingly, it adopted a national policy on children in 1974. The policy reaffirmed the constitutional provisions for adequate services to children, both before and after birth and through the period of growth to ensure their full physical, mental and social development. It has also developed appropriate monitoring procedures to assess progress in implementing the convention, involving various stakeholders in the society, in order to ensure child rights practices, and in response to India's commitment to UN declaration to this effect, the Government of India set up a National Commission for Protection of Child Rights, NCPCR. The Commission is a statutory body notified under an Act of the Parliament on 29 December 2006. Besides the chairperson, it will have 6 members from the fields of child health, education, childcare and development, juvenile justice, children with disabilities, elimination of child labor, child psychology or sociology, and laws relating to children. The National Commission for Protection of Child Rights emphasizes the principle of universality and inviolability of child rights and recognizes the tone of urgency in all the child-related policies of the country. For the Commission, protection of all children in the 2000 to 18 years age group is of equal importance. Policies define priority actions for the most vulnerable children. This includes focus on regions that are backward or on communities or children under certain circumstances. The NCPCR believes that while addressing only some children, there could be a fallacy of exclusion of many vulnerable children who may not fall under the defined or targeted categories. In its translation into practice, the task of reaching out to all children gets compromised and a societal tolerance of violation of child rights continues. Therefore, it considers that it is only in building a larger atmosphere in favor of protection of children's rights that children who are targeted become visible and gain confidence to access their entitlements. India is also a signatory to the World Declaration on the Survival, Protection and Development of Children. In pursuance of the commitment made at the World Summit, the Department of Women and Child Development under the Ministry of Human Resources Development has formulated a national plan of action for children. Most of the recommendations of the World Summit Action Plan are reflected in India's National Plan of Action, keeping in mind the needs, rights, and aspirations of 300 million children in the country. The priority areas in the plan are health, nutrition, education, water, sanitation, and environment. The plan gives special consideration to children in difficult circumstances and aims at providing a framework for actualization of the objectives of the Convention in the Indian context. 3.3 WHO is a child. According to international law, a child means every human being below the age of 18 years. This is a universally accepted definition of a child and comes from the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, UNCC, an international legal instrument accepted and ratified by most of the countries. India has always recognized the category of persons below the age of 18 years as distinct legal entity. That is precisely why people can vote or get a driving license or enter into legal contracts only when they attain the age of 18 years. Marriage of a girl below the age of 18 years and a boy below 21 years is restrained under the Child Marriage Restraint Act, 1929. Moreover, after ratifying the UNCC in 1992, India changed its law on juvenile justice to ensure that every person below the age of 18 years who is in need of care and protection is entitled to receive it from the state. According to psychologists, a child is a person, not a sub-person, and the parents have right and responsibility to take care of them. As a child, minor, by law, children do not have autonomy or the right to make decisions on their own for themselves in any known jurisdiction of the world. Instead, their adult caregivers, including their parents, teachers and others, are vested with that authority, depending on the circumstances. Some believe that this state of affairs gives children insufficient control over their own lives and causes them to be vulnerable. What makes a person a child is the person's age. Even if a person under the age of 18 years is married and has children of her his own, she is recognized as a child according to international standards. 3.4 What are children's rights? Children's rights are the rights of special protection and care afforded to the young, including their right to association with both of biological parents, their identity as well as the basic needs for food, universal state-paid education, and health care. Interpretations of children's rights range from allowing children the capacity for autonomous action to the enforcement of children being physically, mentally, and emotionally free from abuse. A right is as an agreement or contract established between the persons who hold a right, often referred to as the rights holders, and the persons or institutions, which then have obligations and responsibilities in relation to the realization of that right, often referred to as the duty bearers. Child rights are specialized human rights that apply to all human beings below the age of 18. According to the United Nations Convention on Rights of Child, UNCC, child rights are minimum entitlements and freedoms that should be afforded to all persons below the age of 18 regardless of race, color, gender, language, religion, opinions, origins, wealth, birth status, or ability, and therefore apply to all people, everywhere. The purpose of the UNCC is to outline the basic human rights that should be accorded to children. The following 4 broad categories of rights cover all civil, political, social, economic, and cultural rights of every child. 3.4.1 Right to survival. A child's right to survival begins before a child is born. According to Government of India, a child's life begins after 20 weeks of conception. Hence, the right to survival is inclusive of the child's right to be born, right to nutrition, health, care, shelter and clothing, and the right to live with dignity. 3.4.2 Right to protection. This includes right to protection from abuse, exploitation, and neglect. A child has the right to be protected from neglect, exploitation, and abuse at home and outside the home. Every child has a right to lead a well-protected and secure life, away from neglect. 3.4.3 Right to participation. A child has the right to participate in any decision-making that involves him/her, directly or indirectly. There are varying degrees of participation as per the age and maturity of the child. Right to participation also includes right to expression, right to information, and right to name and nationality. Every child has a right to know his basic rights and his position in the society. High incidence of illiteracy and ignorance among the deprived and underprivileged children, however, prevents them from having access to information about them and their society. Every child also has a right to identify himself with the nation, but a vast majority of underprivileged children in India are treated like commodities and exported to other countries as labor or prostitutes. 3.4.4 Right to development. Children have the right to all forms of development: emotional, mental, and physical. Emotional development is fulfilled by proper care and love of a support system, mental development through education and learning, and physical development through recreation, play, and nutrition. Thus, right to education and right to recreation are two important rights of children. The Constitution of India guarantees all children certain rights, which have been specially included for them. These include times right to free and compulsory elementary education for all children in the 6-14-year age group. Article 21A. Times right to be protected from any hazardous employment till the age of 14 years. Article 24. Times right to be protected from being abused and forced by economic necessity to enter occupations unsuited to their age or strength. Article 39. Times right to equal opportunities and facilities to develop in a healthy manner and in conditions of freedom and dignity, and guaranteed protection of childhood and youth against exploitation and against moral and material abandonment. Article 39. F. Besides these, they also have the following rights as equal citizens of India. Just as any other adult male or female. Times right to equality. Article 14. Times right against discrimination. Article 15. Times right to personal liberty and due process of law. Article 21. Times right to being protected from being trafficked and forced into bonded labor. Article 23. Times right of weaker sections of the people to be protected from social injustice and all forms of exploitation. Article 46. 3.5 What is child protection? UNICEF considers child protection as the prevention of or responding to the incidents of abuse, exploitation, violence, and neglect of children. This includes commercial sexual exploitation, trafficking, child labor, and harmful traditional practices such as female genital mutilation, cutting, and child marriage. Protection also allows children to have access to their other rights of survival, development, growth, and participation. UNICEF maintains that when child protection fails or is absent, children have a higher risk of death, poor physical and mental health, HIV/AIDS infection, educational problems, displacement, homelessness, vagrancy, and poor parenting skills later in life. According to the Integrated Child Protection Scheme, ICPS, protection is about keeping children safe from a risk or perceived risk to their lives or childhood. It is about recognizing that children are vulnerable and hence reducing their vulnerability by protecting them from harm and harmful situations. Child protection is about ensuring that children have a security net to depend on, and if they happen to fall through the holes in the system has the responsibility to provide the child with the necessary care and rehabilitation to bring them back into the safety net. Research, documentation, and interventions by government and the civil society groups in the past have clearly brought forth some of the following child protection issues that deserve special attention. 1. Gender discrimination. 2. Caste discrimination. 3. Disability. 4. Female feticide. 5. Infanticide. 6. Domestic violence. 7. Child sexual abuse. 8. Child marriage. 9. Child labor. 10. Child prostitution. 11. Child trafficking. 12. Child sacrifice. 13. Corporal punishment in schools. 14. Examination pressure and student suicides. 15. Natural disasters. 16. War and conflict. 17. HIV/AIDS. 3.5.1 Difference between child rights and child protection. It is important to understand the difference between these two concepts. Child rights are a set of principles or ideals. They are entitlements, and some of them are justifiable in a court of law, but they are not tangible. protection is one of these rights. But child protection is more than a right. It is a framework or system by which the rights of a child can be exercised. The framework consists of various duty bearers such as the departments of the government, police, school, civil society, who all have roles to play to ensure that a child's rights are met, and, in the case that a child's rights are violated, that the violator be brought to justice and care be provided to the child. Child protection is not only treatment, but should also be preventive. Risk management needs to take place to reduce the risk of violation of child rights in any given circumstance or space. Child protection is hence the means through which all other rights of a child can be upheld. For example, a child has a right to live a normal childhood in a family environment. The child protection framework need to first take steps to ensure families are able to survive by providing them health, education, and food for free or at minimal cost. The next step is to address the needs of children who have fallen through the cracks, such as destitute, abandoned, and orphan children. The framework includes the mechanisms to relocate these children into caring families either through adoption or foster care and provide these children with access to health and education services. Hence, the framework is not a single ministry or single government body. It is the interlinking functions of all ministries and sectors. 3. 6. Child Rights Counselling. 3.6.1 Vulnerable Child. A vulnerable child means a child who is unable to protect himself or herself. This includes a child who is dependent on others for sustenance and protection. A vulnerable child is defenseless, exposed to behavior, conditions, or circumstances that he or she is powerless to manage, and is susceptible and accessible to a threatening parent or caregiver. Vulnerability is judged according to physical and emotional development, ability to communicate needs, mobility, size, and dependence. All children due to their age are considered to be at risk for exploitation, abuse, violence, and neglect. But vulnerability cannot be defined simply by age. Though age is one component, vulnerability is also measured by the child's capability for self-protection. The question that arises is, are children capable of protecting themselves? Can children provide for their basic needs, defend against a dangerous situation, or even recognize a dangerous situation? A child's vulnerability comes from various factors that hinder a child's ability to function and grow normally. The following factors further compound children's vulnerability. Age within age. Younger children, especially those below the age of 6, are much more dependent on the protection system. 2. Physical disabilities and mental disabilities. Children become more vulnerable to abuse and neglect if they are suffering from any physical or mental disability. 3. Powerlessness comes of the situations and people that surround the children. If a child is given the power by the state, family, or community to participate and fulfill their own rights and responsibilities, they are less vulnerable. 4. Defenselessness comes from the lack of protection provided by the state or parents or community. If there is no child abuse law, then how is a child supposed to defend himself/herself against abuse? Passivity due to situation or treatment of the child. For example, a child who is enslaved or oppressed does not have the ability to seek help or protection. 6. Invisible children who the system doesn't even recognize are highly vulnerable. The Integrated Child Protection (ICPS) defines vulnerability into categories. 1. Children in need of care and protection. 2. Children in conflict with law. A child in need of care and protection is defined as a child who doesn't have a home or shelter and no means to obtain such an abode, resides with the persons who has threatened to harm them and is likely to carry out that threat, harmed other children, and hence is likely to kill, abuse, or neglect. The child is mentally or physically handicapped or has an illness, terminal or incurable disease, and has no one to provide and care for him/her, has a parent or guardian deemed unfit or unable to take care of the child, is an orphan, has no family to take care of him/her, or is a runaway or missing child whose parents cannot be located after a reasonable search period, is being or is likely to be sexual, mentally, emotionally or physically abused, tortured or exploited, is being trafficked or abusing drug substances, is being abused for unthinkable gains or illegal activities, is a victim of armed conflict, civil unrest or a natural disaster. Children in conflict with law are juveniles who have allegedly committed a crime under the Indian Penal Code. The ICPS also recognizes a third category of children, child in contact with law. These children are victims of or witnesses to crimes. ICPS lastly outlines that vulnerable children groups also include but are not limited to the following: children of potentially vulnerable families and families at risk, children of socially excluded groups like migrant families, families living in extreme poverty, scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, and other backward classes. Families subjected to or affected by discrimination, minorities, children affected by HIV/AIDS, orphans, child drug abusers, children of substance abusers, child beggars, trafficked or sexually exploited children, children of prisoners, and street and working children. Thus, vulnerable children are those who are susceptible to abuse, exploitation, and neglect. Child protection is derived out of the duty to respond to the needs of vulnerable groups of children. Let us now discuss the following groups of vulnerable children whose rights are violated and providing counseling to them. 3.6.1.1 Child abuse, the growing complexities and challenges of life coupled with changes in the socio-economic conditions of people have played a major role in increasing the vulnerability of children to various forms of abuse. Child abuse is a violation of the basic human rights of a child. It is a state of emotional, physical, economic, and sexual maltreatment meted out to a person below the age of 18, according to the World Health Organization, WHO. Child abuse or maltreatment constitutes all forms of physical and/or emotional ill-treatment, sexual abuse, neglect or negligent treatment or commercial or other exploitation, resulting in actual or potential harm to the child's health, survival, development, or dignity in the context of a relationship of responsibility, trust or power. Thus, child abuse is the physical, sexual, emotional mistreatment or neglect of children. Child abuse has serious physical and psychosocial consequences which adversely affect the health and overall well-being of a child. Child abuse has many forms: physical, emotional, sexual, neglect, and exploitation. Any of these that are potentially or actually harmful to a child's health, survival, dignity, and development are abuse. Physical abuse is when a child has been physically harmed by kicking, punching, beating, biting, hitting, stabbing, burning, or otherwise harming the child. Emotional abuse is also known as verbal abuse, mental abuse, and psychological maltreatment. It can be seen as a failure to provide a supportive environment and primary attachment figure for a child so that they may develop a full and healthy range of emotional abilities. Emotional abuse consists of acts such as insulting, rebuking, restricting movement, threatening, scaring, discriminating, ridiculing, belittling, etc. Sexual abuse is inappropriate sexual behavior with a child. It is engaging a child in any sexual activity that he/she does not understand or cannot give informed consent for or is not physically, mentally, or emotionally prepared for. This includes using a child for pornography, sexual materials, prostitution, and unlawful sexual practices. To be considered child abuse, these acts have to be committed by a person responsible for the care of a child, for example, a babysitter, a parent, or a daycare provider, or related to the child. If a stranger commits these acts, it would be considered sexual assault and handled solely by the police and criminal courts. Neglect is the failure to provide for the child's basic needs. Neglect can be physical, not providing adequate food, clothing or shelter; medical, lack of appropriate medical and mental health care, educational, failure to provide appropriate schooling or take care of special educational needs, psychological, lack of any emotional support and love, not attending to the child's emotional and psychological needs, counseling for child abuse. The problem of child abuse and human rights violations is one of the most critical matters on the international human rights agenda. In the Indian context, understanding and acceptance of child rights as primary inviolable rights is still to catch up. Counseling to such children can be provided in the following ways. Using props, hugging a doll or favorite stuffed animal or blanket is a way to calm the fears and anxieties of the abused child. They dramatize trauma and abuse by symbolically setting up fantasy worlds, using structured or unstructured play situations, artwork, music, puppets, or clay. Their stories emerge as they set up parallel worlds to their own, allowing the counselor to observe and hypothesize and begin to piece together an appropriate treatment plan. In this safe setting, children can experience challenging emotions and traumas in stages, allowing them also to find ways to adapt to these traumas and regain a sense of control in their lives. As the relationship between counselor and child matures, the child senses unconditional acceptance and begins to build new worlds, ones that offer hope and promise. The counselor addresses any maladaptive behaviors that could put the child at risk for further abuse and even possibly future mental health issues, educating caregivers, and once the counselor has a solid understanding of the child's issues and needs, then educating the child's caregivers becomes imperative. Counselors also support caregivers in implementing the treatment plan, which takes many weeks or months and involves many frustrations and setbacks, even in the most loving and accepting environments. The counselor becomes a teacher as well as therapist, advising the child and caregivers about the course of recovery, which challenges both the child and caregiver at each major developmental stage, from starting school to the teen years, dating, self-sufficiency, and parenting. The child abuse counselor also conducts group sessions for abused children. Young children, for example, benefit from participating in developmental play groups. And children and youth who are sexually abused benefit from group counseling, seeing that they are not alone, and processing their feelings of shame and guilt with others who feel the same. Victims of sexual abuse, depending on the child's age and the type and extent of abuse, also benefit from different therapeutic techniques. These techniques, ranging from psychotherapy to trauma-focused play therapy and trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy, guide victims through processing the experience to normalizing reactions. The counselor works with the child to develop healthy coping patterns while addressing associated conditions of depression, anxiety, panic attacks, and symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder. Biofeedback, eye movement desensitization, and relaxation techniques are also tools that the counselor employs when working with sexually abused children and youth. The therapist also counsels the family or individual family members on adaptive strategies for overcoming abuse and developing healthy family functioning. 3.6.1. To street children. Street children are considered to be an urban problem. Children can be found in railway stations, near temples and dargahs, in markets, under bridges, near bus stops, etc. Hence, the definition of street is not in the literal sense, but refers to those children without a stable home or shelter. There are three major categories of street children. A. Children who live on the street with their families and often work on the street. These may be children from migrated families or temporarily migrated and are likely to go back to their homes. B. Children who live on the street by themselves or in groups and have remote access or contact with their families in the villages. Some children travel to the cities for the day or periods of time to work and then return to their villages. 3. Children who have no ties with their families, such as orphans, refugees, and runaways, it is the second and third category of children who are most vulnerable as they are easy victims of abuse and inhuman treatment. They often engage in petty theft or prostitution for economic survival. Children run away from their homes for a variety of reasons. Some may have faced traumatic experiences in their homes. Their parents may be abusive or have problems with alcoholism, poverty, and unemployment. Some children leave home drawn by the glamour of the big cities. Children of the street are homeless children who live and sleep on the streets in urban areas. They are on their own and do not have any parental supervision or care, though some do live with other homeless adults. Children on the street earn a livelihood from streets such as street urchins and beggars. They return home at night and have contact with their families. The distinction is an important one because children of the street lack emotional and psychological support of a family. Counseling for street children. Street children have many problems related to substance use and sexual and reproductive health, including HIV/AIDS and other STDs. As different individual and social factors contribute to these problems, a variety of responses are required. For the most part, as a street educator, the interventions you will be implementing will focus on changing or influencing the life of the street child. However, to be effective, you will have to times ensure that street children participate as key players in these interventions, times coordinate groups or individuals in the community who work with street children, times ensure that services and resources are available to street children. Interventions should also aim at providing information, building basic skills, providing counseling, improving access to health services, creating a more positive and safe environment, and involving the street children themselves in various activities. Street children need various resources to meet their physical and emotional needs. Resources can be internal, inside a person, e.g., intelligence, capacity to work, etc., or they can be external, outside the person, i.e., in the environment. Example: schools, health services, community organizations, and people who care. Even though street children usually have many internal resources, they usually lack external ones. Without these external resources, they may have a hard time learning new skills that would help improve their lives. It may be more difficult for them to develop healthy ideas and practices about substance use if they do not have the benefit of resources such as street education and informational campaigns. If they have fewer ways of coping with stress, they may fall back on substances to relieve it. Your task involves identifying these resources and making them available or accessible to street children. The question of prevention or treatment of substance use and sexual and reproductive health problems and providing support to street children can be approached at 3 levels. 1. Individual level, street children. 2. Local community level. 3. Beyond the community, life skills can enable the street children to be assertive, e.g., the ability to state one's dislike for sex or substance use clearly. This skill helps street children to communicate their needs and to resist social pressures, negotiate, the ability to discuss and get others to agree to what one wants. A street child could negotiate to use a contraceptive method such as condoms during sexual intercourse. Think critically. Street children can learn to assess potential risks in various situations ahead of time and think about why they engage in risk behavior. A street child who knows the problems that may arise from substance use and realizes that he or she uses substances as a way of making friends or coping with stress may try to find other ways of addressing those needs and avoid getting involved in using substances, develop self-awareness and self-esteem, increasing understanding of personal strengths, interests, personal priorities and goals. This can decrease the attitude of just letting it happen. Make and build friendships. Having real friends can be a source of support and protection and may help street children resist pressure from adults who try to exploit them. life skills are not applied in isolation, rather they depend on each other. For example, to learn decision making, street children should be able to identify their feelings about their situation and what they want out of life. Self-awareness. The learning and application of life skills also need to be closely linked to the reality of the street children's lives. 3.6.1.3 Disability in children. Disability in children, physical as well as mental disability leads to neglect and abuse of children. The main causes of disability in children are times communicable disease, times infection in early childhood, times early motherhood, times nutritional deficiencies, times insufficient or inaccessible health care services, times inadequate sanitation, times interfamily marriages. There are many protection issues that also lead to disability. Children who are trafficked, abused, and sexually exploited are at risk for psychological effects as well as physical problems. Other forms of violence against children can also lead to a disability such as corporal punishment in schools, children living on the streets, and purposefully created disabilities for begging. Children from poor families face a double disability. Disability is still functioning in the realm of social welfare instead of a rights perspective. Teachers are not trained and schools don't have the infrastructure to deal with children with disabilities. Treatment for disability in children. Comprehensive counseling interventions for children include individual and group therapy, case management, rehabilitation counseling, and psychiatric consultation with a family and child psychiatric physician. Individual consultation for parents is also available to better prepare them to help their children, teens, and transition age adolescents. Additional services are as follows. Therapeutic behavioral services. TBS is available for children with extreme needs who have required hospitalization in the past couple of years. These children may qualify for intensive behavioral treatment in the home, school, or community. Significant parental consultation may also be provided. 2. Behavioral life coaching. Adolescents and transitional age young people benefit from behavioral life coaching as it helps foster integration into the community and the development of skills leading to independence within the context of their diagnoses. 3. Transitional Youth Program. These programs help young people deal with emerging developmental and psychological issues post-high school. It fosters behavioral skill development for a smoother transition to community life. 4. Behavioral consultation. This helps parents, supervisors at care homes, and others learn about using effective reward systems to teach young clients how to achieve success in their home and community settings. Family support and education. Monthly meetings can provide information and much-needed support to parents or significant others, including care workers who serve children with developmental disabilities who have mental health needs. 3.6.1.4 Drug abuse. If current trends continue, 250 million children alive today will be killed by tobacco. WHO. The incidence of drug abuse among children and adolescents is higher than the general population. This is notably because youth is a time for experimentation and identity forming. In developed countries, drug abuse among youth is generally associated with particular youth subcultures and lifestyles. The use of tobacco is a major concern amongst children. The use of certain drugs such as whitener, alcohol, tobacco, hard and soft drugs is especially widespread among street children, working children, and trafficked children. Drug addiction treatment methods. Drug addiction is a treatable disorder. Through treatment that is tailored to individual needs, patients can learn to control their condition and live normal, productive lives. Like people with diabetes or heart disease, people in treatment for drug addiction learn behavioral changes and often take medications as part of their treatment regimen. Behavioral therapies can include counseling, psychotherapy, support groups, or family therapy. Treatment medications offer help in suppressing the withdrawal syndrome and drug craving and in blocking the effects of drugs. The ultimate goal of all drug abuse treatment is to enable the patient to achieve lasting abstinence, but the immediate goals are to reduce drug use, improve the patient's ability to function, and minimize the medical and social complications of drug abuse. Counseling plays an important role in this. Counseling techniques have been shown to be most effective in bringing positive changes in addiction behaviors. Counseling aims at the following: cognitive, understanding the problem and solution; behavioral, making new habits more comfortable than the old; destructive habits; family systems, realizing the dynamics formed in childhood that affect adult actions, and involving family members to strengthen new response patterns. Positive reinforcement, comfortable social attachments within the new activities, and direction away from old cycles of abuse must be part of any therapy. Alcoholics Anonymous and similar groups offer a place for self-examination, mutual support, and growth at the patient's own pace. Success may lie in the motivation and resolution of the patient to effect positive change. Thus, counseling can be provided to the abused children and their caregivers to help them come out of the trauma, sufferings, and anxieties. Treatment may include psychotherapy, rehabilitation counseling, cognitive behavior therapy, supportive therapy, behavior therapy, play therapy, and other modalities as necessary to assist the individual in overcoming anxiety, fear, and depression. However, most important is that counseling can adopt a preventive approach and create awareness and understanding regarding the rights of the children. This will help protect the children so that they can develop in a healthy way. Counseling strategies can aim at developing a protective environment for children, emphasizing the importance of knowing, understanding, accepting, and enforcing legal standards in child protection. Further, community-based approaches can be used that promote and strengthen the capacity of families and communities to address child protection issues. 3.7 Summary. In this unit you learned about the issues related to child rights and child protection. The meaning of child rights and child protection was discussed. You also came to understand the different forms of child rights violation. Building a protective environment for children will help prevent and respond to this child rights violation, abuse, and exploitation. Counseling strategies to deal with all these were described. A comprehensive approach to address the issue of child protection and child rights should include the following: strengthening government commitment and capacity to fulfill children's right to protection, promoting the establishment and enforcement of adequate legislation, addressing harmful attitudes, customs, and practices, encouraging open discussion of child protection issues that includes media and civil society partners, developing children's life skills, knowledge and participation, building capacity of families and communities, providing essential services for prevention, recovery and reintegration, including basic health, education and protection, and establishing and implementing ongoing and effective monitoring and reporting. Thank you. Subscribe to our channel for more updates, and we will see you with the next chapter.